you can sort of do the same thing. So what if I wanted to slide this vertice up and down the edges? Well, there's a couple ways you can do that. The first way is to hold on the C button, and that's going to change your manipulator to have a circle instead of a square. And use the middle mouse button while you're holding that down and click on an edge. And what it's going to do is it's going to slide along that edge. So that's kind of handy. You can go along either direction. But what if you wanted to scale this exactly to this one here? That's when you'd use this tool. And what you can do now is you can change the pivot point and go to scale that. So that's quite handy. So this tool actually doesn't work as a shelf button. You have to put it onto a hotkey. But I put it right here so that you can grab the code yourself. Basically, you assign it to any key. When you hold it down, you can put the pivot point anywhere. And as soon as you let go of that key that you've assigned it to, it's going to crash your computer. But what should happen is it will turn into the scale tool, and it will scale that along. But let me just pause the video and come back. So this is actually a good example to show you. Maya is not a very stable program. I mean, it's a great program, but it will crash from time to time, as mine just did right here. And sometimes when it does that, it will try and save out the file you're working on right here. And it'll show you where it's saving it. So you can actually go to this folder and find this file. It doesn't always do this, but sometimes it does. And so that's kind of a handy little thing. The purpose of this is just to do a quick last-minute save before the program quits, which is very thoughtful. Of course, if you're using your autosave, then you have a double layer of protection there. But anyway, let me pause the video, and we'll come back. Okay, so we're back, and I've created another plane here. And I was just demonstrating the Scale Pivot tool. So if you put this on a hotkey, as I was saying, you can make a selection of a single vertice, and you can change the pivot point to a neighboring vertice quite easily. It's going to snap to those points, and now you can just scale. And what's happening here is it's going directly to that vertice that you've put the pivot onto. So it's kind of like sliding along this imaginary edge, because when you're working with a square polygon face like this, it really is truly flat. It can't bend in any way. So the direction, or I should say the distance from here to here, is always going to be a linear. There will be no curve or undulation like that. And that will come in handy too when we get into the character stuff. Okay, so moving right along, there's a lot of tools here, so feel free to review this video later if you need to. But these tools are going to help us develop more sophisticated models in the future, which is where we want to go. So anyway, there is a tool that I wrote a while ago called the Uber Snap tool. And I'll just show you what it does first, and then I'll explain what's actually happening underneath in the background afterwards. But let's imagine that you have a beautiful model like this one, and you want to make some sort of change on the surface of it. You want to change the way the edges are flowing, for example, but you don't want to lose this volume. Now we've got tools that work with things like this, like the Relax tool. It will try and preserve the volume, and the Slide Edge tool will try and preserve the volume too. But what if you're working with a very specific model and you just want to have more control? You don't want to leave the surface in any way, and you want to manipulate something very specifically. So here's where you would use this tool that I made called the Uber Snap tool. All you have to do is select a model, click the Uber button. You're going to get a little user feedback here that says the tool is on. There's a little hidden file, or a hidden little object here called Succo now. And now, if you go into component mode, you can freely select a vertice and just scrub it around using the middle mouse button. You could even be in any view whatsoever. And what's going to happen here is it's always going to be snapped to the surface of this object. It can't leave it, which is really great. The only exception is if you explicitly use the handles to drag it off. But as soon as you click in the middle here and go back to free transformation with the middle mouse button, it's going to return to that surface. Same thing with faces. Same thing with edges. One caveat to this is that if you make a big selection, it's always going to use the common middle point of the selection as the snapping point. So although I'm moving these points around and the common area is staying on that where that surface was, it can't account for those individually, unfortunately. So that is a limitation of this. But I find myself in this situation all the time, especially when I'm modeling characters, where I want to preserve the shape that I've made, and I don't want to leave the surface. And so that's just a very handy tool. Now there's another set of tools that work with this. Oh, and really quickly, to exit this mode, you just hit that same hotkey again, or same shelf button, and it'll now say it's off, and that little node has gone away. And so we're back to our common normal modeling situation. Also, the manipulators has returned to a square, so we know we're not snapping anything. And I do use this on a hotkey like everything else in my workflow, so you can see I'll be using this quite a bit, turning it on and off. Okay, so I'm going to leave it on for now, and I'm going to click this little green sort of grid-like icon here. And this is another set of tools that I use, and this is a very handy thing. So these two in particular, relax is sort of like the relax brush that we were using. So this tool was actually written before that relaxed brush was invented in Maya, but it works much the same way. As long as you're in the Uber Snap mode and you see this little succo mesh here, you can relax, and what it's going to do is it's going to average the vertices and then snap them all back onto that surface again. So it's sort of like relaxing in a certain way. But even more powerfully is this thing called suck. And what you can do now, if you want, is you can grab a separate object altogether, like this, for instance, and let's just give it some more divisions. And I'm going to make a selection of vertices in the middle here. And when I hit this button, it's going to snap those on. It's sort of like it's shrink wrapping them onto that surface. And there are many instances where this is a very powerful, handy tool. So, and then if we don't like the way it's done it here, we can relax and make it a little bit more even. And so the end result is something like this, which is kind of cool. And I typically just ignore this button. It does something similar to this, but you know, I never use it. So let's see, what else do we have? Okay, just a couple more things. I just want to remind you that there's a tool called Delete Edge. I'm going to get out of the Uber mode here. There we go. So it's telling me that it's off. If you select an edge in Maya, let's just take these two edges, and I hit the delete key on my keyboard, it's going to delete the edges like you'd expect. But when we go into vertex mode, you can see that it's left this little orphaned vertice here. And we usually don't want that. We usually want that gone. So we'd have to select it and then delete that. But there's a tool that does both of those at the same time. So if I select these edges here, we need to go to Edit Mesh and delete Edge Vertex. And now that has just gotten rid of those edges as well as the vertices. So it's a small thing, but it's a big time saver. And I've got it mapped to a hotkey just like everything else in my workflow. So you'll see me use this a lot. If you ever see edges just disappear like that, I'm using that tool. In fact, if I ever don't use that tool when I'm deleting edges, I'll let you know, because usually there's a specific reason why I would do that. Okay. And the last thing I want to talk about, it's kind of a long explanation. It's going to require a long explanation because it ties into a fundamental aspect of modeling, and that is the split polygon tool. So we had before the split edge loop tool. You've already seen this, where we can just go here and happily click on these edges and add a whole row of edges and vertices. But what if we want to do something more custom? Well, if we can go to Edit Mesh and Split Polygon tool, Where are you? Not this one, but see, I've had these on hotkeys for so long that I don't even know where they are anymore. Okay, let me just find it and then come back. Okay, it's actually called Interactive Split Tool, so they've renamed it. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you this little cool looking orange dot, and wherever you click now with the left mouse button, you're going to begin drawing your own custom edges across this surface. Okay, so what if we just like what we've done here? So I'm just going to hit enter, and now we have new edges and new vertices that go along on this line. So again, that's the interactive split tool from the edit mesh menu. And this version of this tool is new ever since Maya 2011. And in my experimenting, I found that in some ways it's inferior to what was there before.